The Asus ProArt P16 is the kind of laptop you pull out when you need to exercise that sheer creativity in your head into meaningful work. And they don't use the word pro lightly here. This beastly machine has a configuration including AMD's Ryzen AI9 HX370 processor. We also have a colossal 64 gigabytes of LPDDR5 memory, NVIDIA's RTX 4070 graphics with 8 gigabytes of VRAM. We also have a nice large 2TB SSD. Additionally, we get Wi-Fi 7 and Bluetooth 5.4 connectivity, and yes, this is a gorgeous 4K OLED 16-inch display panel here. Now, this laptop has a lot to unfold. It is truly a creator-oriented device, and we're going to review it in that capacity to tell you everything you need to know, so let's get started. The ProArt P16 wants to make a statement. It's a powerful machine, and what better way than including a larger-than-life box? But fret not, because inside this box is a far more petite box, and inside this petite box is the guest of honor, the P16 itself. But we'll talk about that in just a quick minute. Now, we also have a 200-watt charging adapter, which makes total sense, and you can see it doesn't have Type-C because that's just not going to be able to deliver enough wattage, so we get this proprietary plug instead. We also have the standard wall outlet charging cable piece, and then finally we have some documentation including the quick start information and warranty regulation information as well. The ProArt P16 is undoubtedly a premium tier machine, and the design here totally reflects that. I mean, you've got a top tier military grade aluminum build from top to bottom, which of course makes it feel a lot more elegant. Now, additionally, that black color definitely complements the look of this machine, but my favorite thing about the ProArt P16 is the fact that it has what I consider one of the best chassis designs we've seen on a modern day laptop. It's not obsessed with being sleek, so it doesn't try to compromise on practicality, but at the same time, it keeps a very clean and minimalist form factor. It's linear, it's not trying to be obtuse or, overly obnoxious in the way it presents itself. It's a very subtle and respectable looking machine through and through. With that said, the device does have a modest weight of about 4.08 pounds, which is just ever so slightly above the typical 16-inch weight factor, but by no means excessively heavy. Starting with the top side of the laptop, like I mentioned, you have a aluminum finishing here. There's no unnecessary textures. It's clean, it's simple. You do have some subtle branding on the lower right side, which actually looks very nice. My only gripe with this machine is that it is an absolute fingerprint magnet. So if you have an OCD for that, you will find yourself cleaning this laptop quite often. We've got a healthy selection of I/O ports. So on one side, we have a DC charging port. We also have a HDMI 2.1 port. We have a USB 4 Type-C port with power delivery and DisplayPort functionality, a USB-A SuperSpeed port, and of course the good old headphone jack. On the other side, you will find one more Type-C port with power delivery and DisplayPort as well. You will also appreciate you get one more USB-A port, and then finally a full-size SD card reader, which honestly should be standard on any laptop that claims to be a creator's laptop. The bottom side of this laptop is a very happening place. You've got a lot of air intake vents over here, which makes sense because you technically have 3 discrete fans on this thing, which means there's a lot of cooling going on. You obviously have the heat exhaust vent on the top side here, and then you'll also notice on the bottom side you have 2 speaker grills. So you have a bottom firing speaker system as well as a top firing one. We'll do a sound test later on in the video. Unfold this laptop and you're presented with a nice generous amount of palm rest space, a clean inner chassis which just looks modern. Now with that said, my favorite thing is the trackpad. I mean, this thing has more room than your average European parking lot, seriously. And of course, since it's got a glass coated surface, that means that flex is a non-issue here, and you also get some crisp tactility like tapping on thin ice. Also, you do have the dial pad with the ProArt laptops, which means that you can enable it by simply swiping on the right top corner here, and then you can actually use the dial pad to kind of access special options within various applications that can definitely help with your creative workflow. Still watching? I'm happy to see that. Firstly, a quick shout out to Asus for being kind enough to actually send me this laptop as a review sample so I can check it out. But secondly, I also wanted to ask you guys to please consider subscribing to the channel, liking this video if you are enjoying the content. It's a lot of hard work and a lot of effort to make these videos, and your viewership honestly means the world to me and it's actually everything I stand for. So thank you again for watching. Let's keep going. The keyboard is equally as awesome. I mean, what's not to like? You've got nice large keycaps, easy to read font, color coordinated keys to match with the rest of the body, and then a good layout overall. You also have a fully backlit keyboard that can get quite bright, mind you. Unfortunately, you don't get a 10 keypad, but that makes sense since this is a creator-oriented machine, not so much a productivity-oriented one. Now, the favorite thing with this keyboard is the actual typing experience. You've got a lot of key travel here. It's very tactile. There's no wobble. It is honestly one of the best keyboards I've typed on a laptop recently. Solid A+ here. You'll also notice on either side of the keyboard you have two large speaker grills, which means you also have a top firing speaker system, bringing it to a total of 6 speakers. We'll talk about that later on. And then on the top of the keyboard you do have a ton of overhead space here. And you'll also notice there's a very subtle power button on the right corner. The hinge quality here is also top tier. There's no noticeable wobble. It's well tuned and well calibrated. The only interesting thing to note is that you don't get a full 180-degree tilt, which is kind of weird given this is a touch captive display. Now, moving on to the actual display fitting itself, you do have a fully glass encased fitting here, which looks modern and clean, though you do have a bit of a noticeable chin at the bottom. The side bezels are really nice and narrow, looking clean and modern as well. And then on the top side, you have a barely noticeable forehead, at the center of which you will find a full HD webcam with a built-in IR scanner. The quality here is pretty decent. The display on this thing is like sizzling butter when you're cooking steak. It's so good and smooth. I mean, you start off with a gorgeous OLED panel. It's 16-inch wide, as we already know. You've got a 4K resolution with a 16:10 aspect ratio, a super minimalist 0.2 millisecond response rate. The only downside here is that you get a standard 60Hz display. Honestly, it should have been 120. It would have been a little bit more enticing. But on a brighter note, no pun intended, you have 400 nits of peak brightness with SDR content and up to 500 nits with HDR content. And of course, you have a very nice anti-glare coating, which helps a lot. On top of that, you have a fully touch captive system here, which of course does have stylus support, and it's very responsive. Though my favorite thing here, of course, is the 100% DCI-P3 color gamut coverage, which means colors look vivid, sharp, and stunning, great for creative purposes and just general viewing alike. A quick recap of the technical specs on this thing. So we do have AMD's top-of-the-line Ryzen 9 HX370 processor. We've got a colossal 64GB of LPDDR5X memory, and then we get NVIDIA's RTX 4070 with 8GB of VRAM. It's worth noting you do get the full 105 watts of TDP. We've tested that. Now, as far as day-to-day performance is concerned, this laptop is obviously going to blast through anything you throw at it, whether it's surfing the web, crunching some documents. Now, thanks to that gorgeous display, of course, it's great for creative activities, whether it's photo editing or, playing with images and everything in between. But it's also a great productivity machine. You can do programming on Python, for example, and because of the large resource pool, you're going to have no issues even with the most complex of coding running on it. Additionally, you can also do high tier 3D level modeling on this thing with programs like Blender, and again, you have plenty of resource with no performance drops. And then when you try doing the most demanding of activities like multi-layer 4K video editing, this thing handles it like an absolute champion. You have more than sufficient memory to keep up with the timeline effects, but at the same time, the Ryzen 9 chip here is no joke. This thing is able to kind of give you near lag-free performance even when you have a number of 4K files stacked up together. I really had to push it to its limits to kind of get the occasional frame drop, but this thing is designed for sheer creativity and it definitely delivers. Now, while this is by no means a laptop intended for gaming, it certainly has the hardware to deliver top tier results. And games like Fortnite, for example, can be completely maxed out, running at up to 120 frames per second, often higher, though we don't get to fully utilize this because of the slightly more toned down 60Hz display here. The thermals are even more impressive than the performance. I mean, AMD's done a great job with their new Ryzen chips, so even under the most unrealistic of peak loads, we hit an average surface temperature just shy of 39 degrees Celsius, with a more realistic sustained load yielding us around 35 degrees Celsius. Now, of course, thanks to a combination of a great cooling system and a large body, we're able to achieve this. But seriously, the fan noise is just as nice. I mean, under unrealistic loads, you can hit a maximum of to 58 decibels, but you rarely go that high. Even under demanding workloads, it stays very cool and very quiet, AMD and Asus really knocked it out of the park with this one. Phenomenal job there. You have a handful of self-upgradability options, so while the RAM is entirely soldered on board, you get a pretty decent quantity from the get-go, so I'm not too worried about that. However, you'll be happy to know you have two M.2 2280 slots, one of which of course is preoccupied with the 2TB drive, though you can add a second SSD in the other slot. You can also upgrade or replace the existing Wi-Fi module because it's also connected through a M.2 connection. We get a nice large 90 watt-hour battery with this device, and despite all the heavy hitting hardware on this thing, we were still able to achieve just around 8 hours of realistic runtime on a single charge with a general productivity use case, which is a pretty nice number overall. Now, the speakers here are top tier. You have a 6-speaker system, you have bottom firing speakers, and then you have top firing speakers as well. The result is you get robust sound, there's a lot of depth, it feels great, and it competes with the likes of the 16-inch MacBook Pro. In fact, in some ways, I think the sound is even slightly better. Here's a quick sound test for reference. With a $2,700 price tag for the P16 configuration we have here, the fact is that the ProArt is not for the faint of heart. However, this laptop has a single aim in mind, and that's to please content creators and creative users alike. And in that regard, it exceeds every expectation I had. It's got a high quality, reliable, and rugged build. On top of that, it has a very practical form factor, great port selection, you've got a high quality trackpad, and an equally comfortable and impressive to use keyboard combined with a stunning 4K OLED display here with amazing color realization. The result is, of course, that a creative workflow not only feels powerful but also fun with this machine. The only nitpicky thing I would say is that it would have been nice to have 120Hz refresh rate, but as a creative user, that won't be a showstopper for you by any means. Combined with the fact that you get a top tier Ryzen processor and a powerful NVIDIA RTX 4070 card, you can use it for creative purposes but also get away with some pretty high performance gaming as well if you want to on the side. Generally speaking, if you are looking for an all-in-one solution for your creative needs, you are a professional that cannot compromise on anything, this is the laptop to consider due to all the strengths I mentioned a moment ago. Let me know what you think of the Asus ProArt P16. If you're interested in getting one, I will leave links in the video description below. As always, thank you so much for watching this video. Catch you in the next one.